The cardiologist's phone call to my husband's insurance company lasted exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. In that brief conversation, Dr. Martinez revealed information that would destroy my marriage, expose years of financial betrayal, and ultimately transform me from a dismissed housewife into the owner of a multi-million-dollar medical malpractice settlement. What my husband Derek never expected was that abandoning me during my heart attack would become the most expensive mistake of his life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Chen Morrison, and for 18 years, I believed I was living the American dream in our sprawling suburban home in Scottsdale, Arizona. Derek Morrison, my husband of nearly 2 decades, was a successful commercial real estate developer who specialized in luxury shopping centers across the Southwest. Our life appeared picture-perfect from the outside: manicured lawns, expensive cars in the driveway, annual vacations to European destinations, and a social calendar filled with charity galas and business networking events. Derek had convinced me early in our marriage that my role was to maintain our household and support his ambitious career trajectory. I had graduated from Arizona State University with a degree in business administration and had worked for 3 years at a consulting firm before Derek proposed. His persuasive argument was that his earning potential far exceeded mine, and that our future success depended on his ability to focus entirely on building his real estate empire while I managed everything else. "Victoria, you're so much better at handling the details," Derek would say whenever I expressed interest in returning to professional work. "Besides, with my commission structure, we make more money when I can focus completely on closing deals. You're invaluable to our success by keeping everything else running smoothly." For years, this arrangement seemed to work effectively. Derek's business thrived, generating substantial income that afforded us a comfortable lifestyle. I managed our household with the efficiency of a corporate executive, coordinating maintenance, organizing social events, managing our financial accounts, and handling all administrative aspects of our personal lives. Derek often praised my organizational skills to his colleagues, describing me as the perfect business partner who enabled his professional success. However, beneath the surface of our apparent prosperity, warning signs had been accumulating for months before my heart attack. Derek's behavior had gradually changed in ways I initially attributed to increased business pressure. He worked longer hours, traveled more frequently, and seemed increasingly distant during our conversations. When I attempted to discuss household finances or future planning, Derek would deflect with vague reassurances about his business performance and promises to address financial details later. The most troubling change involved our health insurance arrangements. Derek had always handled our insurance policies through his business, claiming that his corporate coverage provided better benefits than individual policies. Recently, however, I had noticed irregularities in our coverage that Derek dismissed as temporary administrative adjustments related to his business restructuring. "The insurance company is updating their systems," Derek would explain when I questioned why certain medical appointments required different payment procedures. "Everything will normalize once they complete their modernization process." These explanations satisfied me temporarily, primarily because I trusted Derek's expertise in business matters and assumed he was managing our financial affairs with the same competence he demonstrated in his real estate ventures. My focus remained on maintaining our household and supporting his career, just as we had agreed during our early marriage discussions. The months preceding my heart attack had been particularly stressful for both of us. Derek's business had encountered challenges related to financing difficulties for several major development projects. He spent increasing amounts of time in meetings with investors, lawyers, and financial advisors, often returning home exhausted and irritable. Our conversations became shorter and less intimate, with Derek citing overwhelming work pressure as the reason for his emotional distance. During this period, I began experiencing physical symptoms that I initially dismissed as stress-related reactions to Derek's business difficulties. Occasional chest discomfort, unusual fatigue, and shortness of breath during routine activities seemed like reasonable responses to the tension in our household. Derek's preoccupation with his business challenges meant that he rarely noticed my physical discomfort, and I avoided burdening him with additional concerns during his difficult professional period. My decision to minimize my health concerns reflected the pattern we had established throughout our marriage. Derek handled external business challenges while I managed internal household issues, including health matters, without involving him unless absolutely necessary. This division of responsibilities had worked effectively for years, and I saw no reason to change our approach during his current business crisis. The evening before my heart attack represented a typical interaction between Derek and me during this stressful period. He arrived home after 9 o'clock, clearly exhausted from another challenging day of meetings. I had prepared dinner and attempted to create a relaxing environment where we could reconnect and discuss our concerns. However, Derek remained distracted throughout our meal, responding to text messages and reviewing documents on his phone. "How did the investor meeting proceed today?" I asked, hoping to engage him in meaningful conversation about his business challenges. "Complicated," Derek replied without elaborating, his attention focused on his phone screen. "These financing arrangements are more complex than I anticipated, but we should resolve everything within the next few weeks." I attempted several more conversational approaches, but Derek's responses remained brief and distant. Eventually, I abandoned my efforts to connect with him and focused on completing household tasks, while he worked in his home office until late in the evening. This pattern had become our normal routine, with meaningful communication replaced by efficient coordination of practical matters. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Derek typing on his laptop in the adjacent room, I experienced a profound sense of loneliness that had been building for months. Our marriage had gradually transformed from an intimate partnership into a business arrangement where we functioned as efficient roommates rather than loving spouses. The emotional distance between us felt as tangible as the physical space Derek maintained by working late into the night. The chest discomfort I experienced that evening felt more intense than previous episodes, but I attributed it to emotional stress rather than physical illness. The pain seemed connected to my feelings of isolation and concern about Derek's business problems, rather than any medical condition requiring immediate attention. I took some over-the-counter pain medication and attempted to sleep, hoping that morning would bring improvement in both my physical discomfort and Derek's emotional availability. When I awakened the following morning, Derek had already left for an early breakfast meeting with potential investors. His absence was typical for recent weeks, as his business challenges required increasingly frequent morning appointments. I found a brief note on the kitchen counter explaining that his meeting might extend into the afternoon, and that I should not wait for him for lunch or dinner plans. The chest pain that had troubled me the previous evening had intensified overnight, accompanied by unusual fatigue and difficulty breathing during routine morning activities. As I prepared breakfast and attempted to begin my daily household tasks, the physical symptoms became impossible to ignore. The pain radiated from my chest down my left arm, and I experienced nausea and dizziness that forced me to sit down repeatedly during simple activities like loading the dishwasher. By mid-morning, I realized that my symptoms represented something more serious than stress-related discomfort. The pain had become severe enough to interfere with my ability to function normally, and the breathing difficulties were frightening in their intensity. I attempted to reach Derek by phone to inform him about my condition, but his phone went directly to voicemail, indicating that he was in meetings where interruptions were not welcome. My decision to drive myself to the emergency room reflected both the severity of my symptoms and my reluctance to disrupt Derek's important business meetings. Throughout our marriage, I had handled medical appointments and health concerns independently, consulting Derek only when significant decisions or expenses were involved. This approach had worked effectively for routine medical care, and I assumed it would be adequate for addressing my current symptoms. The drive to Scottsdale Medical Center became increasingly difficult as my symptoms intensified. The chest pain grew more severe, and my breathing became labored to the point where I questioned my ability to operate the vehicle safely. By the time I reached the hospital parking lot, I was experiencing the most intense physical discomfort of my life, accompanied by a growing sense of panic about the seriousness of my condition. The emergency room staff responded immediately to my symptoms, recognizing the signs of a potential cardiac event. Within minutes of my arrival, I was connected to monitoring equipment and surrounded by medical professionals conducting rapid assessments of my condition. The efficiency and urgency of their response confirmed my growing suspicion that my symptoms represented a genuine medical emergency rather than stress-related discomfort. Mrs. Morrison, you appear to be experiencing a myocardial infarction. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the attending cardiologist, explained as nurses prepared me for immediate intervention. We need to perform emergency procedures to restore blood flow to your heart muscle. Do you have family members we should contact immediately? Through the haze of pain medication and mounting anxiety, I provided Derek's contact information and explained that he was in business meetings but should be reachable for emergency situations. The medical team assured me that they would contact him immediately while focusing their attention on stabilizing my condition and preparing for the necessary cardiac procedures. The next several hours passed in a blur of medical interventions, monitoring equipment, and constant activity from the cardiac care team. Dr. Martinez and her colleagues worked efficiently to address the blockage in my coronary arteries, explaining each step of their treatment plan while monitoring my responses to their interventions. Their professional competence and obvious concern for my welfare provided reassurance during the most frightening experience of my life. Throughout this medical emergency, I expected Derek to arrive at any moment. Despite his recent emotional distance, I assumed that news of my heart attack would immediately bring him to the hospital, where he would provide the emotional support and practical assistance I needed during this crisis. Our marriage had weathered various challenges over 18 years, and I believed that a genuine medical emergency would restore our partnership and mutual concern. However, as the hours passed without Derek's arrival, my confusion gradually transformed into concern and eventually into a growing sense of abandonment. The nursing staff repeatedly asked about my husband's expected arrival time, clearly assuming that family support was essential during cardiac recovery. My repeated explanations that Derek was traveling to the hospital became increasingly hollow as evening approached without any communication from him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Martinez, who had successfully completed the emergency procedures necessary to stabilize my condition, noticed my obvious distress about Derek's absence. Her professional experience had taught her that family support significantly impacts cardiac recovery, and she was clearly concerned about my emotional state during this critical period. Mrs. Morrison, let me try reaching your husband directly, Dr. Martinez offered. Sometimes family members have difficulty processing emergency information, and hearing directly from medical staff helps them understand the severity of the situation. I provided Derek's direct phone number, grateful that Dr. Martinez was willing to make personal contact with him. I assumed that hearing from my cardiologist would immediately clarify the seriousness of my condition and bring Derek to the hospital where he belonged during this medical crisis. Dr. Martinez stepped into the hallway to make the phone call, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the constant beeping of cardiac monitoring equipment. Through the partially open door, I could hear portions of her conversation with Derek, and what I overheard would fundamentally change my understanding of my marriage, my financial security, and my husband's character. The conversation I overheard would prove to be the catalyst for the most profound transformation of my life, converting a medical emergency into an opportunity for empowerment and justice that exceeded anything I could have imagined during those frightening hours in the cardiac care unit. The conversation between Dr. Martinez and Derek began with professional courtesy and medical necessity. Through the partially open door of my cardiac care room, I could hear her explaining my condition with the precise language that cardiologists use when communicating with family members about serious medical events. Mr. Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez at Scottsdale Medical Center. Your wife Victoria has experienced a significant myocardial infarction and required emergency intervention to restore blood flow to her heart muscle. She is currently stable, but this represents a serious cardiac event that will require ongoing monitoring and treatment. Derek's response was audible through the phone, his voice carrying the tone of someone receiving unexpected and unwelcome information. A heart attack? Are you certain? Victoria has never had any heart problems. She's only 43 years old. Dr. Martinez maintained her professional demeanor while explaining the medical realities of cardiac events in younger women, the specific procedures that had been performed, and the importance of family support during recovery. Her explanation was thorough and compassionate, clearly designed to help Derek understand both the severity of my condition and the steps necessary for my optimal recovery. Mr. Morrison, cardiac events can occur at any age, particularly when underlying risk factors are present. Your wife's condition required immediate intervention, and we successfully restored blood flow to the affected area. However, she will need comprehensive follow-up care, including medication management, lifestyle modifications, and regular monitoring by a cardiologist. What followed next would forever alter my understanding of my marriage and financial security. Derek's response to Dr. Martinez's medical explanation revealed priorities and concerns that had nothing to do with my health or recovery. Doctor, before we discuss treatment plans, I need to understand the insurance implications of this situation. Victoria's medical coverage has recently changed due to modifications in my business structure. I want to ensure that any treatments you provide are properly authorized to avoid billing complications. Dr. Martinez's pause was noticeable even through the phone conversation. Her professional experience had taught her to recognize when family members were more concerned about financial implications than patient welfare, and Derek's immediate focus on insurance matters rather than my condition clearly surprised her. Mr. Morrison, I understand your concern about coverage verification, but your wife's condition requires immediate ongoing care regardless of insurance considerations. We can certainly work with your insurance provider to ensure proper authorization, but the priority must be her medical stabilization and recovery planning. Derek's next statement revealed the true extent of his deception and the calculated nature of his abandonment at the hospital. His words, spoken to my cardiologist while I lay in cardiac care recovering from a heart attack, demonstrated a level of callousness that redefined my understanding of his character. Dr. Martinez, I need to be direct with you about our insurance situation. Victoria is no longer covered under my business policy. Her coverage was terminated 6 months ago when I restructured my company's benefits package. She should have obtained individual coverage but apparently failed to do so. I cannot be responsible for medical expenses that result from her negligence in maintaining proper insurance. The silence that followed Derek's statement felt interminable. Dr. Martinez was clearly processing the implications of what she had heard, both for my medical care and for my personal situation. Her professional training had prepared her for many difficult family dynamics, but Derek's casual dismissal of responsibility for my medical emergency was extraordinary even by her standards. Mr. Morrison, are you indicating that Mrs. Morrison has no medical insurance coverage for this cardiac event? Derek's confirmation of my uninsured status was delivered with the clinical detachment of someone discussing a minor business inconvenience rather than his wife's medical crisis. That's correct. Victoria was informed about the insurance changes months ago and was responsible for securing alternative coverage. Any medical expenses incurred today are her responsibility, not mine. Dr. Martinez's professional composure remained intact, but her voice carried a subtle edge that indicated her growing concern about Derek's priorities and behavior. Mr. Morrison, regardless of insurance considerations, your wife has experienced a serious cardiac event and needs immediate family support. When should we expect your arrival at the hospital? Derek's response would haunt me for months afterward, representing the moment when 18 years of marriage were reduced to a calculated business decision based on financial convenience rather than human compassion. Doctor, I cannot leave my current business meetings to come to the hospital today. I have critical investor presentations that cannot be rescheduled, and frankly, Victoria's decision to let her insurance lapse has created a situation that I cannot resolve by being physically present. Please ensure that she understands the financial implications of any treatment decision she makes. Quote, Dr. Martinez's professional training had not prepared her for a spouse who would prioritize business meetings over a wife's heart attack, particularly when that spouse was simultaneously denying financial responsibility for medical care. Her response reflected both her medical expertise and her growing understanding of the personal dynamics that had contributed to my current situation. Mr. Morrison, I must strongly encourage you to reconsider your priorities. Your wife has survived a major cardiac event, but recovery requires both medical treatment and emotional support. Her psychological well-being directly impacts her physical recovery, and family presence is considered essential during this critical period. Derek's final statement during that phone conversation revealed the complete transformation of his priorities and the calculated nature of his emotional withdrawal from our marriage. His words demonstrated that my heart attack represented an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a crisis requiring his immediate attention and support. Doctor, Victoria is a capable woman who has managed household crises effectively for years. I'm confident she can handle this medical situation with the same competence she brings to other responsibilities. Please ensure that any financial arrangements she makes reflect her personal responsibility for this situation." Quote. The phone call ended with Dr. Martinez's professional but clearly strained acknowledgement of Derek's position, followed by her assurance that my medical care would continue regardless of insurance complications. Her return to my room brought both medical updates about my condition and the devastating revelation about Derek's response to my emergency. Dr. Martinez approached my bedside with the careful demeanor of someone preparing to deliver difficult information. Her medical training had taught her to balance honesty with compassion when discussing challenging situations with patients, but Derek's behavior had clearly challenged her professional experience with family dynamics during medical crises. "Mrs. Morrison, I have spoken with your husband about your condition and treatment plan. However, I need to discuss some important information with you about your insurance coverage and financial arrangements for your care." The conversation that followed represented the most profound disillusionment of my adult life. Dr. Martinez explained Derek's claims about my insurance status, his denial of financial responsibility for my medical care, and his refusal to come to the hospital during my cardiac emergency. Each revelation felt like additional physical pain, layered upon the trauma my heart had already experienced. "Mrs. Morrison, according to your husband, your medical insurance was terminated 6 months ago, and he believes you were responsible for securing alternative coverage. He has also indicated that he cannot leave his business commitments to provide support during your recovery." The implications of Derek's statements began crystallizing in my mind as the pain medication allowed me to think more clearly about my situation. If Derek's claims about insurance termination were accurate, I faced potential medical bills that could easily exceed $100,000 for emergency cardiac intervention. More devastating was the realization that Derek had allowed me to remain uninsured while knowing that I had no knowledge of the coverage termination. However, as Dr. Martinez continued explaining Derek's statements, inconsistencies began emerging that suggested his version of events was incomplete or potentially fraudulent. His claim that I had been informed about insurance changes contradicted my clear recollection of our conversations about medical coverage. His assertion that I was responsible for securing alternative insurance conflicted with our long-established arrangement where he managed all business and financial matters. Dr. Martinez, I was never informed about any insurance changes. Derek has always handled our medical coverage through his business, and he specifically told me that recent changes were temporary administrative adjustments that would be resolved automatically. Dr. Martinez's expression reflected her growing understanding that Derek's statements about insurance and responsibility did not align with my recollection of events. Her medical ethics training had taught her to advocate for patients, particularly when family dynamics appeared to compromise appropriate care and support. "Mrs. Morrison, these discrepancies suggest that we need to conduct independent verification of your insurance status. Healthcare facilities have resources for investigating coverage questions when family accounts conflict. Would you like me to initiate a comprehensive review of your medical benefits?" Quote. My agreement to insurance investigation would prove to be the first step in uncovering a systematic pattern of financial deception that extended far beyond medical coverage. Dr. Martinez's willingness to advocate for my interests during this vulnerable period provided both practical assistance and emotional validation that someone cared about my welfare despite Derek's abandonment. The initial insurance investigation conducted by the hospital's financial services department revealed information that contradicted every aspect of Derek's explanation about coverage, termination, and responsibility. Rather than discovering that I had negligently allowed my insurance to lapse, the investigation uncovered evidence of deliberate deception designed to transfer financial liability for my medical care, while Derek maintained his own comprehensive coverage. Hospital records showed that Derek's business insurance policy had indeed been modified 6 months earlier, but the changes involved removing me from coverage while maintaining benefits for Derek and adding coverage for someone named Rebecca Walsh, who was listed as Derek's business partner and domestic partner. The documentation indicated that these changes had been processed with Derek's electronic signature and explicit authorization. The revelation that Derek had removed me from insurance coverage while adding another woman represented betrayal on multiple levels. The financial implications were staggering, but the personal implications were even more devastating. Derek had systematically eliminated my medical security while establishing benefits for another woman, suggesting that my heart attack had interrupted a carefully planned transition away from our marriage. Dr. Martinez returned to my room with additional information that further clarified Derek's deception and the calculated nature of his abandonment during my medical emergency. Her investigation had revealed details about the insurance modifications that demonstrated deliberate intent to transfer financial responsibility to me while protecting Derek's business interests. Mrs. Morrison, the insurance investigation has revealed several important facts about your coverage situation. Your removal from Derek's business policy was processed with specific documentation, indicating that you were establishing independent coverage. However, there is no record of any alternative insurance application or policy activation in your name. The implications of this discovery meant that Derek had deliberately created a situation where I would be personally responsible for any medical expenses, while believing that I remained covered under his business policy. His claims about informing me of coverage changes were demonstrably false, as evidenced by the lack of any alternative insurance arrangements that would have been necessary if I had actually been informed about the policy modifications. More disturbing was the revelation that Rebecca Walsh, the woman who had been added to Derek's insurance policy, was listed with her home address and described as Derek's domestic partner in business documentation. This suggested that Derek had been planning to replace me not only in his insurance coverage but potentially in our shared residence and business arrangements. The scope of Derek's deception extended beyond insurance fraud to encompass a comprehensive strategy for separating his financial assets from any responsibility for my welfare. His abandonment during my heart attack was not an emotional reaction to stress, but rather the implementation of a calculated plan to establish legal and financial distance from my circumstances. As the full implications of Derek's betrayal became clear, I experienced a transformation that began during those hours in the cardiac care unit. The physical trauma of my heart attack was compounded by the emotional trauma of discovering that my husband had systematically planned to abandon me during any serious medical emergency. However, this devastating knowledge also created the foundation for an empowerment journey that would ultimately provide justice and financial security beyond anything I had previously imagined. Dr. Martinez's advocacy during my insurance investigation had revealed not only Derek's deception, but also potential legal violations related to insurance fraud and abandonment that would prove crucial for my eventual legal response. Her professional integrity and personal concern for my welfare provided both immediate support and practical assistance that would prove invaluable for addressing Derek's betrayal. The evening of my heart attack, as I lay in the cardiac care unit surrounded by monitoring equipment and medical professionals who had saved my life, I began planning a response to Derek's betrayal that would demonstrate the strength, intelligence, and strategic thinking that he had underestimated throughout our marriage. The woman he had abandoned was not the helpless victim he expected, but rather someone capable of transforming devastating betrayal into unprecedented personal empowerment. The morning after my heart attack brought both physical recovery challenges and the beginning of a systematic investigation that would reveal the full scope of Derek's financial deception. Dr. Martinez had arranged for my continued monitoring in the cardiac care unit, while hospital administrators worked to resolve the insurance complications that Derek's betrayal had created. Their professional advocacy provided both medical security and the emotional support necessary for me to begin addressing the broader implications of my situation. The cardiac rehabilitation team had explained that recovery from my heart attack would require several months of careful medical monitoring, medication management, and lifestyle modifications. However, the financial uncertainty created by Derek's insurance fraud threatened to compromise my access to the specialized care that cardiologists considered essential for optimal recovery. This medical necessity provided additional motivation for pursuing comprehensive investigation of Derek's financial manipulations. Hospital social worker Jennifer Park had been assigned to assist with the complex personal and financial challenges that my situation presented. Her professional experience with family dynamics during medical crises had taught her to recognize signs of domestic financial abuse, and Derek's behavior exhibited classic patterns of systematic resource control designed to create dependency and vulnerability. Her expertise would prove invaluable for understanding the legal implications of Derek's actions. Mrs. Morrison, Your husband's removal of your insurance coverage while maintaining his own benefits represents a form of financial abuse that often accompanies other controlling behaviors. Medical emergencies frequently reveal patterns of manipulation that were previously hidden beneath the surface of apparently functional relationships. Jennifer explained during our initial consultation. Her assessment aligned with my growing recognition that Derek's recent emotional distance and dismissive responses to my concerns represented deliberate preparation for abandoning our marriage, rather than temporary stress reactions to business challenges. The systematic nature of his deception suggested planning that extended far beyond insurance modifications, indicating potential manipulation of other financial arrangements that required immediate investigation. Jennifer's advocacy included connecting me with hospital resources for conducting independent financial analysis when family members appeared to be concealing or manipulating shared assets. The hospital's legal department maintained relationships with attorneys who specialized in cases involving medical emergencies complicated by domestic financial abuse, providing access to expertise that would prove crucial for addressing Derek's systematic deception. The initial financial investigation began with reviewing bank account statements and credit card records for our household accounts, documents that Derek had always managed but which remained accessible through online banking systems where I retained authorized access. The patterns that emerged from this analysis revealed financial manipulations that extended far beyond insurance fraud, demonstrating a comprehensive strategy for transferring marital assets while creating legal distance from financial responsibility for my welfare. Over the previous 8 months, Derek had systematically transferred substantial sums from our joint accounts into business accounts and investment vehicles that bore only his name. These transfers were structured to appear like routine business expenses or investment diversification, but their timing and amounts suggested deliberate preparation for separating his financial assets from any shared marital property that might be subject to division during divorce proceedings. The most concerning discovery involved the systematic reduction of funds in accounts that I had always understood to be designated for emergency expenses and retirement planning. Derek had transferred nearly $200,000 from these accounts into business investments that provided him exclusive control while eliminating my access to funds that had been accumulated through shared financial contributions throughout our marriage. Credit card statements revealed additional evidence of Derek's preparation for abandoning our marriage while maintaining financial advantages for himself. Substantial charges for apartment deposits, furniture purchases, and household establishment expenses had been processed through business accounts, suggesting that Derek had been establishing an alternative residence while concealing these arrangements from me. The timing of these expenses coincided with his claims about temporary business travel and extended meeting schedules. Most disturbing was the discovery that Derek had been making substantial financial support payments to Rebecca Walsh, the woman who had been added to his insurance policy as a domestic partner. These payments were structured as business consulting fees, but their regularity and amounts suggested personal support rather than professional services. Bank records showed that these payments had been ongoing for nearly 1 year, indicating that Derek's relationship with Rebecca represented a long-term arrangement rather than a recent development. The scope of financial deception that emerged from this initial investigation demonstrated that Derek's abandonment during my heart attack represented the culmination of systematic planning rather than an impulsive response to medical emergency stress. His behavior throughout the previous year had been designed to establish legal and financial separation while maintaining the appearance of marital stability until circumstances provided an opportunity for decisive action. However, Derek's confidence in his financial manipulations was based on assumptions about my capabilities and resources that would prove to be significantly inaccurate. His dismissive attitude toward my intelligence and strategic thinking abilities had prevented him from recognizing that I possessed both the skills and determination necessary for conducting comprehensive investigation of his deception and developing effective responses to his betrayal. My business administration education from Arizona State University had included comprehensive training in financial analysis, accounting principles, and legal frameworks governing business relationships. While I had not utilized these professional skills during my years as a household manager, my foundational knowledge remained intact, and proved essential for understanding the technical aspects of Derek's financial manipulations and their legal implications. More importantly, my years of managing complex household operations had developed sophisticated organizational and analytical capabilities that proved invaluable for systematic investigation. Coordinating multiple service providers, managing detailed budgets, and maintaining accurate records for tax and insurance purposes had required skills that were directly applicable to financial investigation and legal preparation. The discovery of Derek's systematic deception also revealed that I possessed access to financial records and legal documentation that he had not anticipated would be available for investigation. His assumption that I remained ignorant about business and financial matters had prevented him from implementing security measures that would have concealed his manipulations from someone with appropriate analytical skills and access to relevant information. Over the following days, my investigation expanded to include professional consultation with forensic accountants and family law attorneys who specialized in cases involving complex financial deception during marriage dissolution. Their expertise provided both validation of my initial findings and strategic guidance for developing comprehensive legal responses that would address Derek's systematic violations of fiduciary responsibilities and legal obligations to marital partnership. Forensic accountant Maria Santos reviewed my preliminary analysis and confirmed that Derek's financial transfers represented clear violations of legal standards governing marital property management during ongoing marriages. Her professional assessment indicated that Derek's systematic asset transfers could be legally challenged and potentially reversed through appropriate court action, providing pathways for recovering funds that had been improperly diverted from shared marital assets. Mrs. Morrison, your husband's financial transfers exhibit classic patterns of deliberate asset concealment designed to disadvantage a spouse during divorce proceedings. These actions represent violations of fiduciary duties that courts take very seriously, particularly when they occur during periods when one spouse was unaware of impending marriage dissolution, Maria explained during our consultation. Her analysis also revealed that Derek's business structure modifications, including the insurance changes that had left me without medical coverage, were potentially subject to legal challenge based on laws governing spousal support obligations and shared financial responsibilities during marriage. The systematic nature of his deceptions suggested coordinated planning that might constitute legal fraud rather than simple business reorganization. Family law attorney Catherine Rodriguez provided additional strategic perspective on the legal implications of Derek's behavior and the potential remedies available through court action. Her experience with complex divorce cases involving financial deception had taught her to recognize patterns of systematic manipulation and develop comprehensive responses that addressed both immediate needs and long-term financial security. Victoria, your husband's abandonment during your medical emergency, combined with his systematic financial deceptions, represents egregious violations of both legal obligations and basic human decency. Courts have increasingly recognized that financial abuse during marriage constitutes grounds for substantial compensatory awards designed to address both economic damages and punitive consequences for deliberate betrayal, Catherine explained during our initial meeting. Her legal analysis indicated that Derek's behavior provided grounds for pursuing not only equitable division of marital assets, but also substantial additional compensation for the financial abuse, emotional distress, and medical endangerment that his actions had created. The systematic nature of his deceptions suggested intentional misconduct that courts were empowered to address through comprehensive financial remedies. Perhaps most importantly, Catherine's review of the insurance documentation revealed that Derek's modification of medical coverage without my knowledge or consent potentially constituted insurance fraud that carried both civil and criminal implications. Her legal research indicated that deliberately removing a spouse from medical coverage while maintaining false representations about continued protection could result in substantial legal liability beyond simple divorce proceedings. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Derek's relationship with Rebecca Walsh included business arrangements that might constitute violations of his professional licensing requirements and fiduciary obligations to his real estate clients. His use of business resources to support personal relationships while concealing these arrangements from business partners and clients suggested potential professional misconduct that could affect his career viability and earning capacity. As the scope of Derek's deceptions became clear through systematic investigation, I experienced a profound transformation in my understanding of both my marriage and my personal capabilities. The woman who had been dismissed as a helpless housewife was revealing herself to be someone capable of sophisticated financial analysis, strategic planning, and comprehensive legal preparation that would prove far superior to Derek's casual assumptions about my abilities. The investigation process itself provided tremendous psychological empowerment, as I demonstrated to myself that I possessed the intelligence, skills, and determination necessary for addressing complex challenges independently. Each discovery of Derek's deceptions strengthened my confidence in my ability to develop and implement effective responses that would protect my interests and ensure appropriate consequences for his systematic betrayal. More significantly, the investigation revealed that Derek's attempts to isolate me financially had actually created legal vulnerabilities for himself that I could exploit through appropriate strategic action. His confidence in his superior business sophistication had prevented him from recognizing that systematic financial abuse during marriage created substantial legal liability that could result in financial consequences, far exceeding any advantages he hoped to gain through his deceptive practices. The comprehensive nature of the evidence that emerged from this investigation provided foundation for legal action that would address not only the immediate challenges created by Derek's abandonment during my medical emergency, but also the systematic financial abuse that had preceded and enabled his betrayal. The documentation I had compiled would prove essential for pursuing justice and financial security through court proceedings designed to address deliberate misconduct during marriage. As I prepared to transition from investigation to strategic legal action, I recognized that Derek's greatest mistake had been underestimating the woman he had systematically betrayed. His assumptions about my passivity and dependence would prove to be catastrophically inaccurate, as I demonstrated capabilities for strategic thinking and effective action that he had never suspected I possessed throughout our 18 years of marriage. The comprehensive evidence gathered during my initial investigation provided the foundation for developing a strategic legal response that would address Derek's systematic financial abuse while ensuring appropriate consequences for his abandonment during my medical emergency. The scope of his deceptions had created multiple legal vulnerabilities that required coordinated action across several areas of law, including family court proceedings, insurance fraud investigations, and professional misconduct complaints. Catherine Rodriguez's legal expertise proved essential for developing a comprehensive strategy that would maximize the likelihood of achieving both immediate financial security and long-term justice for Derek's systematic betrayal. Her experience with complex divorce cases involving financial deception had taught her to coordinate multiple legal approaches simultaneously, creating comprehensive pressure that prevented defendants from focusing their defensive resources on any single area of vulnerability. Victoria, Derek's behavior presents us with opportunities for pursuing legal remedies through several different channels simultaneously. We can address the marriage dissolution through family court while pursuing insurance fraud charges through criminal proceedings, and filing professional misconduct complaints with real estate licensing authorities. This multi-pronged approach creates maximum pressure while providing multiple pathways for achieving financial recovery, Catherine explained during our strategic planning session. Her analysis of Derek's systematic financial transfers revealed that his actions constituted clear violations of legal standards governing fiduciary responsibilities during marriage, providing grounds for pursuing not only equitable asset division but also substantial punitive damages designed to address the deliberate nature of his misconduct. The systematic timing and concealment of his financial manipulations demonstrated intentional efforts to defraud me of marital property rights and financial security. The development of our legal strategy required careful coordination of evidence presentation, witness preparation, and procedural timing to ensure that each component of our comprehensive approach reinforced the others while building toward maximum impact during court proceedings. Catherine's strategic planning emphasized the importance of maintaining an element of surprise while assembling overwhelming evidence that would prevent Derek from developing effective defensive responses. Forensic accountant Maria Santos continued her detailed analysis of Derek's financial records, expanding her investigation to include business transactions, investment activities, and professional relationships that might reveal additional evidence of systematic deception or misconduct. Her forensic expertise was essential for translating complex financial data into clear legal arguments that would be comprehensible to judges and juries while demonstrating the calculated nature of Derek's betrayal. The pattern of financial transfers that Derek implemented over the past year, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of asset protection strategies combined with deliberate intent to defraud his spouse of marital property rights. These actions require extensive planning and coordination, indicating that his abandonment during your medical emergency was not an emotional reaction, but rather the implementation of a premeditated strategy for escaping financial obligations to your welfare, Maria concluded after completing her detailed analysis. Her forensic investigation revealed that Derek's business restructuring had been designed not to improve operational efficiency or respond to market challenges, but rather to create legal structures that would protect his assets from any claims related to marriage dissolution or spousal support obligations. The timing of these modifications coincided precisely with his developing relationship with Rebecca Walsh, suggesting coordination between his personal betrayal and financial preparation for abandoning our marriage. The insurance fraud investigation required specialized legal expertise from attorneys who understood both healthcare law and criminal fraud prosecution procedures. Catherine's professional network included specialists who could pursue Derek's insurance manipulations through both civil recovery actions and criminal complaint procedures, creating additional pressure while potentially recovering substantial damages for the medical expenses and emotional distress his deceptions had created. Insurance fraud attorney Michael Chen reviewed the documentation surrounding Derek's removal of my medical coverage and concluded that his actions potentially violated multiple criminal statutes related to fraud, conspiracy, and endangerment. His analysis indicated that deliberately removing a spouse from medical coverage while concealing this action could constitute criminal fraud that carried substantial penalties, including financial restitution and potential imprisonment. Mr. Morrison's insurance modifications were implemented with clear documentation, indicating that you had been informed of coverage termination and had assumed responsibility for securing alternative protection. However, the evidence indicates that no such communication occurred, and that you remained completely unaware of your uninsured status. This deliberate deception during implementation of coverage changes constitutes insurance fraud that carries both civil and criminal liability, Michael explained during our consultation. His investigation also revealed that Derek's addition of Rebecca Walsh to his insurance policy included false documentation about their relationship status and shared residence that might constitute additional fraud violations. The systematic nature of these false representations suggested coordinated planning designed to establish Rebecca's benefits while eliminating my coverage through deliberately fraudulent means. The professional misconduct investigation required understanding the ethical obligations that govern Derek's real estate license and business operations. His use of business resources to support personal relationships while concealing financial manipulations from business partners potentially violated professional standards that could result in license suspension or revocation, eliminating his primary source of income and professional reputation. Real estate attorney David Park reviewed Derek's business practices and confirmed that his systematic diversion of business resources for personal benefit while concealing financial arrangements from business partners represented clear violations of professional conduct standards. His analysis indicated that Derek's manipulations could be reported to state licensing authorities with substantial likelihood of disciplinary action that would affect his ability to continue practicing real estate development. Professional real estate licenses require maintenance of ethical standards in both business and personal financial management. Your husband's systematic financial deceptions, particularly his insurance fraud and spousal abandonment during medical emergency, represent conduct that licensing authorities consider fundamentally incompatible with professional real estate practice, David explained during our consultation. The comprehensive legal strategy that emerged from these consultations involved coordinated action across multiple areas of law designed to address Derek's systematic misconduct, while ensuring maximum financial recovery and appropriate consequences for his deliberate betrayal. The timeline for implementation required careful sequencing to maintain legal advantages while building momentum through early successes that would strengthen our position for more complex proceedings. The family court proceedings would address immediate issues including temporary financial support during my medical recovery, emergency access to marital assets for healthcare expenses, and preliminary asset preservation orders that would prevent Derek from continuing his systematic transfer of marital property. These early court actions would provide immediate financial security while establishing legal precedents for our comprehensive divorce proceedings. Catherine's preparation for family court emphasized the importance of demonstrating Derek's systematic financial abuse and medical abandonment as evidence of his fundamental unfitness for shared custody or favorable asset division. The documentation we had assembled would prove that Derek's behavior represented deliberate cruelty rather than business necessity, providing grounds for substantial compensatory awards and punitive financial consequences. Victoria, Derek's abandonment during your heart attack provides us with extraordinary leverage in family court proceedings. Judges have significant discretion in addressing spousal misconduct, and systematic financial abuse combined with medical abandonment represents behavior that courts consider fundamentally incompatible with equitable treatment during divorce proceedings, Catherine advised during our preparation sessions. The insurance fraud proceedings would be pursued simultaneously through both civil recovery actions and criminal complaint procedures, creating comprehensive pressure while potentially recovering substantial damages that extended beyond simple medical expense reimbursement. The systematic nature of Derek's insurance deceptions provided grounds for pursuing punitive damages designed to address the deliberate endangerment that his actions had created. Criminal complaint procedures required coordination with law enforcement agencies and prosecutors who specialized in white-collar fraud cases. The evidence of Derek's systematic insurance manipulations and false documentation provided foundation for criminal charges that could result in substantial financial penalties and potential imprisonment, creating additional incentives for favorable settlement negotiations. The professional misconduct complaints would be filed with state real estate licensing authorities and professional association disciplinary committees, targeting Derek's ability to continue earning substantial income through real estate development. The systematic nature of his financial deceptions and professional ethical violations provided grounds for license suspension or revocation that would eliminate his primary source of financial resources. Strategic timing of these various legal actions required careful coordination to maximize their cumulative impact, while preventing Derek from developing effective defensive strategies. Catherine's experience had taught her that simultaneous pressure through multiple legal channels often produced more favorable outcomes than sequential proceedings that allowed defendants time to adapt and respond to each challenge individually. The preparation phase also included developing comprehensive financial projections that would demonstrate the long-term economic impact of Derek's systematic abuse and abandonment. These calculations would be essential for pursuing appropriate compensatory damages, while ensuring that any settlement or court award provided sufficient resources for my ongoing medical care and financial security throughout my recovery and beyond. Medical expert preparation involved working with Dr. Martinez and other healthcare professionals to document the relationship between Derek's abandonment and the additional medical complications that emotional stress during cardiac recovery could create. Their testimony would be crucial for establishing the full scope of damages that Derek's behavior had caused, while demonstrating the ongoing medical risks that his abandonment had created. The comprehensive legal strategy that emerged from this planning process represented a sophisticated response to Derek's systematic betrayal that would address every aspect of his misconduct, while ensuring maximum financial recovery and appropriate consequences for his deliberate cruelty. The coordination of multiple legal approaches would create overwhelming pressure while providing numerous pathways for achieving justice and financial security. As we prepared to begin implementation of this comprehensive legal strategy, I experienced a profound sense of empowerment that contrasted dramatically with the helplessness I had felt during Derek's abandonment at the hospital. The systematic preparation and professional collaboration had transformed my apparent victimization into strategic advantage, while demonstrating capabilities for complex legal planning that Derek had never suspected I possessed. The woman who had been dismissed as a dependent housewife was revealing herself to be someone capable of orchestrating sophisticated legal responses to systematic financial abuse. Derek's confidence in his superior business expertise would prove to be catastrophically inaccurate as I demonstrated strategic thinking and legal preparation that far exceeded his casual assumptions about my capabilities and determination. The implementation of our comprehensive legal strategy would begin with family court proceedings designed to establish immediate financial security, while preserving evidence and preventing Derek from continuing his systematic asset transfers. These initial legal actions would provide both practical protection and psychological validation, that someone who had been systematically betrayed possessed the resources and expertise necessary for achieving comprehensive justice through appropriate legal channels. The implementation of our comprehensive legal strategy commenced with filing emergency motions in family court, designed to secure immediate financial protection while preserving marital assets from Derek's continued manipulation. Catherine Rodriguez had structured these initial legal actions to create maximum impact while establishing precedents that would strengthen our position throughout the subsequent proceedings. The timing was calculated to coincide with Derek's scheduled investor presentations, ensuring that legal process service would occur during his most professionally vulnerable moments. The emergency motion for temporary spousal support addressed the immediate crisis created by Derek's insurance fraud and medical abandonment. Catherine's legal arguments emphasized that Derek's systematic removal of my medical coverage while concealing this action from me constituted deliberate endangerment that required immediate court intervention to prevent further harm. The motion requested substantial monthly support payments, sufficient to cover my ongoing cardiac care while ensuring financial stability during the extended legal proceedings ahead. The emergency asset preservation order sought to freeze all marital property transfers and require court approval for any significant financial transactions involving assets that had been accumulated during our marriage. This legal mechanism would prevent Derek from continuing his systematic transfer of funds to accounts under his exclusive control, while ensuring that marital assets remained available for equitable distribution during divorce proceedings. Most significantly, the motion for emergency access to Derek's business insurance policy sought immediate reinstatement of my medical coverage with retroactive effect to cover all expenses related to my cardiac emergency. Catherine's legal research had revealed that courts possessed authority to order reinstatement of spousal insurance coverage when removal had been accomplished through fraudulent means or systematic deception designed to shift financial liability. The service of these legal documents occurred at Derek's downtown office during a critical investor meeting for one of his major development projects. Professional process servers delivered the comprehensive legal package while Derek was presenting financial projections to potential investors, creating immediate disruption of his carefully orchestrated business presentation while ensuring that his professional associates became aware of the serious legal challenges he was facing. Derek's initial response to the legal service revealed both his shock at the scope of my legal preparation and his continued underestimation of my strategic capabilities. According to the process server's report, Derek's composure completely collapsed upon reviewing the legal documents, transforming from confident business presenter to visibly distressed defendant within minutes of receiving service. His investor meeting concluded abruptly as Derek attempted to process the implications of comprehensive legal action across multiple areas of law. The legal documents included detailed evidence of Derek's systematic financial deceptions, insurance fraud, and professional misconduct that he had assumed would remain concealed indefinitely. The comprehensive nature of our investigation and the sophisticated legal arguments presented in our motions demonstrated preparation and strategic thinking that contradicted his assumptions about my capabilities and resources for mounting effective legal resistance to his betrayal. Derek's immediate response involved contacting expensive legal representation through the same firm that handled his business transactions, assuming that superior financial resources would provide adequate defense against my legal actions. However, his consultation with Hartwell, Briggs & Associates revealed that the evidence we had assembled created substantial legal vulnerabilities that would be difficult to defend regardless of the quality of his legal representation. Marcus Hartwell, the senior partner who reviewed Derek's case, provided an assessment that fundamentally challenged Derek's expectations about the likely outcomes of our legal proceedings. His preliminary analysis indicated that Derek's systematic financial deceptions and insurance fraud had created criminal liability exposure that extended beyond simple divorce proceedings, potentially resulting in consequences that would affect his business license and professional reputation. Mr. Morrison, the documentation that your wife has assembled indicates systematic financial manipulation and insurance fraud that creates exposure across multiple areas of law. The evidence suggests deliberate planning and coordination over extended periods, which courts and prosecutors consider aggravating factors that increase potential penalties and financial liability. Hartwell explained during Derek's initial consultation. Hartwell's analysis also revealed that Derek's abandonment during my medical emergency, combined with his systematic financial abuse, provided grounds for substantial punitive damages that could far exceed simple equitable asset division. The calculated nature of his betrayal during my cardiac crisis demonstrated callousness that courts were empowered to address through comprehensive financial remedies designed to provide both compensation and deterrent effects. Derek's assumption that expensive legal representation would neutralize the evidence of his systematic misconduct proved to be fundamentally incorrect. Hartwell's professional assessment indicated that the scope and quality of evidence we had assembled would be extremely difficult to challenge, regardless of the defensive strategies his legal team might employ. The systematic nature of Derek's deceptions had created documentation that would be virtually impossible to explain away through alternative interpretations. The emergency court hearing scheduled for the following week would provide Derek's first direct confrontation with the legal consequences of his systematic betrayal. Catherine's preparation emphasized presenting overwhelming evidence of Derek's financial abuse and medical abandonment, while demonstrating the immediate necessity for court intervention to prevent further harm to my financial security and medical recovery. Catherine's strategy for the emergency hearing involved systematic presentation of evidence that would establish Derek's pattern of deliberate deception while demonstrating the immediate risks that his continued financial manipulations created for my welfare. The presentation would begin with medical testimony about the relationship between emotional stress and cardiac recovery, establishing the health implications of Derek's abandonment and ongoing financial abuse. Dr. Martinez had agreed to provide expert testimony about the medical consequences of Derek's abandonment during my cardiac emergency and the ongoing risks that financial stress created for my recovery. Her professional assessment indicated that emotional trauma during cardiac rehabilitation could significantly increase risks of additional cardiac events, making Derek's systematic financial abuse a direct threat to my physical health and medical stability. Emotional stress during cardiac recovery creates measurable physiological impacts that can compromise healing and increase risks of subsequent cardiac events. Mr. Morrison's abandonment during his wife's medical emergency, combined with his systematic financial abuse, creates ongoing stress that directly threatens her medical recovery and long-term cardiac health. Drive. Martinez would testify during the emergency hearing. Forensic accountant Maria Santos had prepared detailed analysis of Derek's financial transfers that would demonstrate the systematic nature of his asset manipulation, while quantifying the financial impact of his deceptions on marital property available for my support and medical care. Her testimony would establish that Derek's financial manipulations were designed specifically to disadvantage me during divorce proceedings while protecting his personal assets from any claims related to spousal support obligations. The evidence presentation would also include documentation of Derek's relationship with Rebecca Walsh and his systematic transfer of marital resources to support their developing personal relationship while concealing these arrangements from me. Bank records showed regular payments to Rebecca that coincided with Derek's emotional withdrawal from our marriage, demonstrating that his abandonment was coordinated with establishment of an alternative relationship, rather than resulting from business stress or marital difficulties. Derek's legal team faced the challenging task of developing defensive arguments that could explain away systematic evidence of deliberate financial abuse and medical abandonment. Hartwell's preliminary strategy involved characterizing Derek's actions as business decisions necessitated by economic pressures, rather than personal betrayal designed to harm my interests. However, the systematic timing and concealment of Derek's financial transfers would make such explanations difficult to sustain under cross-examination. The broader implications of Derek's legal exposure extended beyond family court proceedings to include potential criminal prosecution for insurance fraud and professional disciplinary action that could affect his business license. The coordination of legal actions across multiple jurisdictions created pressure that would prevent Derek from focusing his defensive resources on any single area of vulnerability, while increasing the likelihood of achieving comprehensive accountability for his systematic misconduct. Insurance fraud prosecutor Jennifer Walsh had reviewed the evidence of Derek's systematic insurance manipulations and concluded that criminal charges were warranted based on the deliberate nature of his deceptions and the substantial financial harm they had created. Her preliminary assessment indicated that Derek's actions met established criteria for prosecution under state fraud statutes that carried substantial financial penalties and potential imprisonment. The evidence indicates systematic manipulation of insurance coverage designed to shift financial liability while concealing material changes from the affected party. This pattern of behavior constitutes insurance fraud that requires prosecution to protect other potential victims and maintain integrity of insurance systems. Prosecutor Walsh explained during our consultation about criminal complaint procedures. The professional misconduct investigation had progressed to formal complaint procedures with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which maintained ethical standards for licensed professionals that included personal financial conduct and professional integrity requirements. Derek's systematic financial deceptions and insurance fraud represented behavior that licensing authorities considered fundamentally incompatible with professional real estate practice. The emergency court hearing would provide Derek's first comprehensive understanding of the legal consequences that his systematic betrayal had created. His assumption that abandoning me during my medical emergency would eliminate his financial obligations to my welfare would prove to be catastrophically incorrect, as courts demonstrated their authority to address deliberate spousal abuse through comprehensive financial remedies. Derek's preparation for the emergency hearing revealed his continued underestimation of my strategic capabilities and the quality of legal representation I had assembled. His legal team's defensive strategy appeared to assume that emotional appeals about business pressure would overcome systematic evidence of deliberate financial manipulation and medical abandonment. This approach would prove inadequate when confronted with comprehensive documentation of his calculated betrayal. The evening before the emergency hearing, Derek made his first direct contact with me since his abandonment at the hospital, attempting to negotiate private resolution of our legal proceedings without court intervention. His approach revealed both his growing awareness of his legal vulnerabilities and his continued assumption that he could manipulate me through emotional appeals and financial pressure, rather than accepting accountability for his systematic misconduct. Derek's attempted negotiation involved offers of limited financial support in exchange for withdrawal of legal proceedings, particularly the criminal fraud complaints, and professional misconduct charges that threatened his business license and earning capacity. His proposals demonstrated recognition that his systematic deceptions had created legal liability, while revealing his assumption that financial settlements could eliminate accountability for deliberate betrayal during medical emergency. However, Derek's negotiation approach continued to reflect his fundamental misunderstanding of my transformation from dependent spouse to strategic legal advocate, capable of pursuing comprehensive justice through appropriate legal channels. The woman who had been dismissed as helpless housewife had developed capabilities for sophisticated legal strategy that would prove far superior to his assumptions about emotional manipulation and financial pressure as effective defensive tactics. The emergency court hearing would demonstrate to Derek that his systematic financial abuse and medical abandonment had created legal consequences that extended far beyond his casual expectations about divorce proceedings. The comprehensive evidence we had assembled would establish patterns of deliberate misconduct that courts were empowered to address through substantial financial remedies and ongoing protective orders designed to prevent further abuse. The Maricopa County Family Court convened at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning with Judge Patricia Hawkins presiding over the emergency hearing that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of my legal proceedings against Derek. The courtroom atmosphere reflected the gravity of the allegations contained within our comprehensive legal filings, with court personnel demonstrating the heightened attention that cases involving medical abandonment and systematic financial abuse typically received within the family court system. Judge Hawkins possessed extensive experience with complex divorce proceedings involving allegations of domestic financial abuse, having developed professional expertise in recognizing patterns of systematic manipulation designed to disadvantage vulnerable spouses during marriage dissolution. Her judicial reputation emphasized thorough analysis of evidence combined with decisive action when circumstances warranted immediate intervention to protect endangered parties from ongoing abuse or financial manipulation. Derek arrived at the courthouse accompanied by his legal team from Hartwell, Briggs & Associates, their expensive suits and confident demeanor reflecting the substantial financial resources that Derek had assumed would provide adequate defense against my legal actions. However, their preliminary case review had revealed the comprehensive nature of evidence we had assembled, creating recognition that defensive strategies would prove more challenging than Derek had initially anticipated. Marcus Hartwell's opening statement attempted to characterize Derek's systematic financial transfers and insurance modifications as reasonable business decisions necessitated by economic pressures rather than deliberate attempts to defraud me of marital property rights or medical coverage. His argument emphasized Derek's professional obligations to protect business assets while portraying the timing of various financial changes as coincidental rather than coordinated efforts to disadvantage me during divorce proceedings. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison's business restructuring activities represented prudent financial management during challenging economic conditions. The insurance modifications were implemented as part of comprehensive cost reduction measures designed to maintain business viability during temporary market difficulties. Any suggestion that these actions were motivated by intent to harm Mrs. Morrison's interests mischaracterizes legitimate business decisions as personal misconduct, Hartwell argued during his opening presentation. However, Catherine Rodriguez's opening statement systematically dismantled Derek's defensive narrative through methodical presentation of evidence that demonstrated the calculated timing and deliberate concealment that characterized his financial manipulations. Her presentation emphasized the coordination between Derek's asset transfers, insurance fraud, and relationship development with Rebecca Walsh, establishing patterns of behavior that contradicted claims about business necessity or coincidental timing. Your Honor, the evidence will demonstrate that Mr. Morrison implemented a systematic strategy designed to eliminate his financial obligations to his wife, while establishing alternative personal relationships supported by marital assets. His abandonment during Mrs. Morrison's cardiac emergency represents the culmination of months of deliberate planning rather than an emotional response to medical crisis. Catherine stated with precision that immediately established the comprehensive nature of our legal preparation. The first witness testimony came from Dr. Sarah Martinez, whose professional assessment of Derek's medical abandonment provided crucial foundation for understanding the immediate health risks that his behavior had created for my cardiac recovery. Her medical expertise established the direct relationship between emotional stress during cardiac rehabilitation and increased risks of subsequent cardiac events, demonstrating that Derek's ongoing financial abuse constituted a measurable threat to my physical health. Dr. Martinez's testimony included detailed explanation of the standard medical protocols for family support during cardiac recovery, emphasizing that spousal presence and emotional stability represented essential components of optimal treatment outcomes. Her professional assessment indicated that Derek's abandonment during my medical emergency violated fundamental principles of cardiac care, while creating ongoing stress that directly compromised my healing process and long-term medical prognosis. Cardiac recovery requires comprehensive support that includes both medical intervention and emotional stability. Mr. Morrison's abandonment during his wife's medical emergency created trauma that measurably impacts her physiological healing process. The ongoing financial stress that his systematic abuse continues to generate represents a direct threat to her cardiac health that requires immediate intervention to prevent additional medical complications. Dr. Martinez testified with clinical precision that left no doubt about the medical significance of Derek's behavior. Her testimony also addressed the specific medical expenses that Derek's insurance fraud had created, including emergency cardiac intervention, ongoing medication management, and specialized rehabilitation services that would be necessary for optimal recovery. The financial impact of Derek's deliberate removal of my medical coverage exceeded $100,000 in immediate expenses, with additional costs for long-term cardiac monitoring and preventative care that could extend into hundreds of thousands of dollars over subsequent years. Judge Hawkins demonstrated particular attention to Dr. Martinez's testimony about the relationship between ongoing financial stress and cardiac recovery outcomes. Her judicial experience had taught her that domestic financial abuse often created health consequences that extended far beyond immediate economic impacts, requiring court intervention to address both the financial manipulation and its physiological effects on victim welfare. Forensic accountant Maria Santos provided the second crucial component of our evidence presentation through systematic analysis of Derek's financial transfers and business restructuring activities. Her professional expertise enabled presentation of complex financial data in formats that clearly demonstrated the deliberate timing and coordinated nature of Derek's asset manipulation, while quantifying the financial impact of his systematic deceptions on marital property available for spousal support. Maria's testimony revealed that Derek's business modifications had been designed specifically to transfer marital assets into accounts and investment vehicles that provided him exclusive control while creating legal obstacles for recovery during divorce proceedings. The timing of these transfers coincided precisely with his developing relationship with Rebecca Walsh, demonstrating coordination between personal betrayal and financial preparation for abandoning marital obligations. Mr. Morrison's financial transfers exhibit systematic patterns designed to disadvantage his spouse during divorce proceedings, while protecting his personal assets from claims related to spousal support obligations. These transactions were structured to appear like routine business activities while actually accomplishing deliberate asset concealment that violates fiduciary duties governing marital property management. Maria testified with professional authority that made Derek's defensive claims about business necessity appear implausible. Her forensic analysis also revealed the scope of financial support that Derek had provided to Rebecca Walsh through business accounts, demonstrating that marital assets had been systematically diverted to support his alternative relationship, while he simultaneously eliminated my access to medical coverage and financial security. The quantified evidence showed transfers exceeding $300,000 over 18 months, representing substantial marital property that had been improperly diverted from shared assets. The presentation of evidence regarding Derek's relationship with Rebecca Walsh included documentation that contradicted his claims about the timeline and nature of their association. Bank records, insurance modifications, and business expense reports demonstrated that their relationship had been ongoing for nearly 2 years, rather than representing recent developments, indicating that Derek's emotional withdrawal from our marriage had coincided with systematic preparation for replacing me in both personal and financial arrangements. Judge Hawkins requested clarification about the insurance fraud allegations, particularly Derek's systematic removal of my medical coverage, while adding Rebecca Walsh as a domestic partner with false documentation about their residence and relationship status. Catherine's response included detailed evidence of the fraudulent representations that Derek had provided to insurance companies while concealing these modifications from me, creating criminal liability exposure that extended beyond family court jurisdiction. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison provided false information to insurance companies regarding both the termination of his wife's coverage and the addition of Ms. Walsh as a domestic partner. The documentation indicates deliberate misrepresentation designed to shift financial liability while establishing benefits for his romantic partner through fraudulent means, Catherine explained while presenting comprehensive evidence of Derek's insurance manipulations. Derek's cross-examination by Catherine revealed his inability to provide coherent explanations for the systematic timing and coordination of his financial transfers, insurance modifications, and relationship development. His testimony demonstrated obvious preparation for defensive responses, but the comprehensive nature of evidence made plausible alternative explanations impossible to sustain under detailed questioning about specific transactions and their relationship to his personal circumstances. Catherine's cross-examination technique emphasized the calculated nature of Derek's deceptions, while highlighting his assumption that I would remain ignorant of his financial manipulations indefinitely. Her questioning revealed Derek's fundamental misunderstanding of my capabilities for financial analysis and legal preparation, demonstrating that his confidence in superior business expertise had prevented him from implementing adequate concealment measures for his systematic fraud. Mr. Morrison, you testified that your wife was informed about insurance coverage changes, yet no documentation exists of any communication regarding these modifications. You also testified that business pressures necessitated asset transfers, yet these transfers occurred during periods of stable business performance. How do you reconcile these inconsistencies with your claims about legitimate business necessity? Catherine's questioning systematically dismantled Derek's defensive narrative while establishing his pattern of deliberate deception. Derek's responses revealed increasing desperation, as the comprehensive nature of evidence made his prepared explanations appear implausible under sustained examination. His assumptions about emotional manipulation and claims of business necessity proved inadequate when confronted with systematic documentation of deliberate timing and coordinated financial abuse designed to disadvantage me during divorce proceedings. Judge Hawkins concluded the evidentiary portion of the hearing with pointed questions about Derek's abandonment during my medical emergency, particularly his refusal to provide support during cardiac crisis, while simultaneously denying financial responsibility for medical expenses. Her judicial experience had rarely encountered such systematic coordination of personal cruelty with financial manipulation, creating recognition that comprehensive remedial action would be necessary to address the scope of Derek's misconduct. Mr. Morrison, your testimony indicates that you prioritized business meetings over your wife's cardiac emergency, while simultaneously claiming that her medical expenses were her personal responsibility due to insurance coverage that you had secretly terminated. Please explain how this behavior aligns with marital obligations or basic human decency. Judge Hawkins inquired with judicial authority that left no doubt about her assessment of Derek's character and behavior. Derek's response revealed his continued inability to recognize the moral and legal implications of his systematic betrayal, with defensive explanations that emphasized his business obligations while minimizing the significance of abandoning me during life-threatening medical emergency. His testimony demonstrated the fundamental narcissism that had enabled his systematic abuse while confirming that rehabilitation or genuine remorse remained unlikely. Judge Hawkins announced her intention to issue comprehensive orders addressing both immediate financial security and ongoing protection from Derek's systematic abuse. Her preliminary assessment indicated that Derek's behavior warranted substantial remedial action across multiple areas, including emergency spousal support, asset preservation, insurance reinstatement, and protective measures designed to prevent continued financial manipulation during extended legal proceedings. The evidence presented during this hearing demonstrates systematic financial abuse, combined with medical abandonment, that represents some of the most egregious spousal misconduct that this court has encountered. Mr. Morrison's behavior warrants comprehensive remedial action designed to address both the immediate harm he has created and the ongoing threats that his conduct presents to Mrs. Morrison's welfare and recovery. Judge Hawkins announced with judicial authority that left no doubt about the severity of consequences that Derek would face. The comprehensive nature of Judge Hawkins' preliminary assessment exceeded even Catherine's optimistic projections about potential court intervention, indicating that Derek's systematic abuse had created legal consequences that would fundamentally alter the power dynamics in our divorce proceedings while ensuring appropriate accountability for his deliberate misconduct during my medical emergency. Judge Patricia Hawkins reconvened the emergency hearing the following morning to announce her comprehensive ruling, which would establish immediate financial remedies while laying groundwork for extended legal proceedings addressing Derek's systematic misconduct. The courtroom atmosphere reflected the gravity of judicial intervention in cases involving deliberate spousal abandonment during medical emergencies, with court personnel demonstrating heightened attention to proceedings that would establish important precedents for addressing domestic financial abuse. The comprehensive nature of Judge Hawkins' orders exceeded even Catherine Rodriguez's most optimistic projections regarding potential court intervention. Her judicial experience with complex family law matters had prepared her to recognize patterns of systematic abuse that required decisive action to prevent ongoing harm, while ensuring appropriate accountability for deliberate misconduct that threatened victim welfare and medical recovery. Judge Hawkins began her ruling by addressing the immediate medical and financial crisis that Derek's abandonment and insurance fraud had created, emphasizing that court intervention was necessary to prevent further deterioration of my health and financial security during the extended legal proceedings that would be required to address the full scope of his systematic deceptions. The evidence presented in this matter demonstrates deliberate and systematic financial abuse combined with medical abandonment that represents extraordinary misconduct requiring immediate judicial intervention. Mr. Morrison's behavior has created both immediate health risks and ongoing financial instability that this court is empowered and obligated to address through comprehensive remedial orders, Judge Hawkins announced with judicial authority that established the serious nature of Derek's legal consequences. The first component of her comprehensive ruling addressed emergency spousal support designed to ensure my financial stability during cardiac recovery and extended legal proceedings. The monthly support amount of $12,000 reflected both the substantial income that Derek generated through his real estate development activities and the extraordinary circumstances created by his systematic financial abuse and medical abandonment. Judge Hawkins explained that the emergency spousal support calculation incorporated punitive elements designed to address Derek's deliberate misconduct, while ensuring that financial resources remained available for my comprehensive medical care and legal representation. The amount exceeded standard calculations for temporary spousal support, reflecting judicial recognition that Derek's systematic abuse warranted enhanced financial accountability beyond routine divorce proceedings. Mr. Morrison's systematic financial abuse and deliberate medical abandonment have created extraordinary circumstances that require enhanced spousal support, reflecting both Mrs. Morrison's immediate needs and appropriate consequences for his egregious misconduct. The monthly support amount of $12,000 will remain in effect throughout these proceedings and may be modified based on additional evidence of financial manipulation or ongoing abuse. Judge Hawkins stated with clarity that eliminated any ambiguity about Derek's immediate financial obligations. The emergency asset preservation order represented the second crucial component of judicial intervention, freezing all marital assets and requiring court approval for any significant financial transactions involving property that had been accumulated during our marriage. This comprehensive order prevented Derek from continuing his systematic transfer of marital property, while ensuring that sufficient assets remained available for equitable distribution during divorce proceedings. Judge Hawkins emphasized that the asset preservation order reflected evidence of Derek's ongoing efforts to conceal and transfer marital property in violation of fiduciary duties governing spousal financial obligations during marriage. The systematic nature of his asset manipulation demonstrated continued intent to defraud me of marital property rights, requiring immediate judicial intervention to prevent further financial harm. The evidence demonstrates that Mr. Morrison has engaged in systematic efforts to transfer and conceal marital assets in violation of his fiduciary obligations to his spouse. This court hereby orders immediate preservation of all marital property and requires court approval for any financial transactions exceeding $5,000 pending resolution of these proceedings, Judge Hawkins announced while establishing comprehensive protection against continued financial manipulation. The insurance reinstatement order addressed the immediate medical coverage crisis that Derek's fraudulent insurance modifications had created, requiring immediate restoration of my medical benefits, with retroactive coverage for all expenses related to my cardiac emergency and ongoing recovery. This order included provisions for Derek to assume full financial responsibility for medical expenses that his insurance fraud had created. Judge Hawkins explained that Derek's systematic removal of my medical coverage while concealing these modifications constituted insurance fraud that created both civil and criminal liability. The court's authority to order immediate reinstatement reflected judicial recognition that deliberate elimination of spousal medical coverage during ongoing marriage represented fundamental violations of support obligations that required immediate remedial action. Mr. Morrison's fraudulent removal of his wife's medical coverage while concealing these modifications constitutes deliberate endangerment that requires immediate correction. This court orders immediate reinstatement of Mrs. Morrison's medical benefits with retroactive coverage for all expenses related to her cardiac emergency. Mr. Morrison shall assume full financial responsibility for all medical costs resulting from his insurance fraud. Judge Hawkins ruled with emphasis that established Derek's comprehensive liability for the medical crisis his deceptions had created. The protective order component of Judge Hawkins' comprehensive ruling addressed Derek's pattern of financial abuse and emotional manipulation, establishing legal barriers against continued harassment or intimidation designed to interfere with my legal proceedings or medical recovery. This order included provisions prohibiting Derek from contacting me directly except through legal counsel and preventing him from accessing financial accounts that had been designated for my support and medical expenses. Judge Hawkins emphasized that protective orders in cases involving systematic financial abuse often proved essential for preventing continued manipulation and intimidation tactics designed to discourage victims from pursuing comprehensive legal remedies. Derek's behavior during the emergency hearing had demonstrated continued efforts to minimize his misconduct while avoiding accountability for the systematic nature of his financial deceptions. Mr. Morrison's pattern of systematic financial abuse and medical abandonment indicates likelihood of continued efforts to intimidate or manipulate Mrs. Morrison during these proceedings. This court hereby issues comprehensive protective orders prohibiting direct contact except through legal counsel and preventing access to designated financial accounts, Judge Hawkins announced while establishing legal protections against continued abuse. The business asset investigation order represented perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of Derek's systematic misconduct, requiring comprehensive forensic accounting of all business transactions and professional relationships over the previous 3 years. This investigation would examine Derek's use of business resources for personal benefit, his financial relationship with Rebecca Walsh, and potential violations of professional conduct standards that governed his real estate license. Judge Hawkins explained that evidence presented during the emergency hearing suggested that Derek's financial manipulations extended beyond marital asset transfers, to include potential misuse of business resources and professional relationships in violation of licensing requirements and fiduciary obligations to business partners and clients. The comprehensive business investigation would determine the full scope of his misconduct while preserving evidence for potential criminal prosecution and professional disciplinary action. The evidence suggests that Mr. Morrison's financial manipulations may extend to misuse of business resources and violations of professional conduct standards. This court orders comprehensive forensic investigation of all business transactions, professional relationships, and potential licensing violations over the previous 3 years. Judge Hawkins ruled while establishing the foundation for expanded accountability measures that could affect Derek's professional license and earning capacity. Derek's response to Judge Hawkins' comprehensive orders revealed both his shock at the severity of judicial intervention and his continued inability to recognize the legal consequences that his systematic misconduct had created. His visible distress during the ruling announcement reflected recognition that his assumptions about superior financial resources providing adequate protection had proven fundamentally incorrect. Marcus Hartwell's immediate motion for reconsideration attempted to characterize Judge Hawkins' orders as excessive responses to routine marital difficulties rather than appropriate remedies for systematic financial abuse and medical abandonment. His arguments emphasized Derek's business obligations and financial pressures while minimizing the deliberate nature of his misconduct and the extraordinary circumstances created by his abandonment during my cardiac emergency. However, Judge Hawkins rejected the reconsideration motion with pointed commentary about the comprehensive evidence of Derek's systematic abuse and the legal standards governing judicial intervention in cases involving deliberate spousal endangerment. Her response emphasized that Derek's behavior warranted enhanced accountability measures beyond routine divorce proceedings due to the calculated nature of his financial manipulation and medical abandonment. Mr. Hartwell, your client's systematic financial abuse and deliberate abandonment during his wife's medical emergency represent extraordinary misconduct that warrants comprehensive judicial intervention. This court's orders reflect appropriate responses to egregious behavior rather than excessive intervention in routine marital difficulties, Judge Hawkins stated with judicial authority that eliminated any possibility of successful reconsideration. The immediate implementation of Judge Hawkins' comprehensive orders created substantial practical consequences for Derek's business operations and personal lifestyle that he had not anticipated when planning his systematic abandonment strategy. The monthly spousal support obligation of $12,000, combined with asset preservation requirements and mandatory insurance coverage, fundamentally altered his financial position while eliminating the advantages he had expected to gain through his calculated betrayal. Derek's business operations faced immediate disruption, as asset preservation orders prevented him from accessing funds that he had transferred to business accounts in violation of marital property rights. The comprehensive forensic investigation would examine all business transactions for evidence of improper use of marital assets, while potentially uncovering additional evidence of professional misconduct that could affect his real estate license. The insurance reinstatement order required Derek to contact his business insurance provider immediately to restore my medical coverage, while accepting financial responsibility for all expenses related to my cardiac emergency and ongoing recovery. This obligation included not only immediate medical costs but also long-term cardiac monitoring and rehabilitation services that could extend into hundreds of thousands of dollars over subsequent years. Most significantly, the protective orders and business investigation requirements created professional embarrassment and potential client concerns that threatened Derek's reputation within the real estate development community. His business associates and potential investors would become aware of the systematic financial abuse allegations and ongoing legal proceedings, potentially affecting his ability to secure financing for future development projects. Derek's consultation with Marcus Hartwell regarding appeal options revealed the limited prospects for successfully challenging Judge Hawkins' comprehensive orders. The systematic evidence of financial abuse and medical abandonment that we had presented created strong foundations for judicial intervention that would be difficult to overturn through appellate proceedings, particularly given the emergency nature of the medical and financial circumstances that Derek's misconduct had created. The broader implications of Judge Hawkins' ruling extended beyond immediate financial remedies to establish important legal precedents for addressing systematic domestic financial abuse in cases involving medical emergencies. Her comprehensive orders demonstrated judicial authority to impose substantial accountability measures when spousal misconduct created health risks and financial instability that threatened victim welfare and recovery. Catherine Rodriguez's assessment of the emergency hearing outcomes emphasized that Judge Hawkins' comprehensive orders provided exceptional foundation for pursuing additional legal remedies through criminal prosecution, professional disciplinary proceedings, and expanded civil litigation addressing the full scope of Derek's systematic misconduct. The judicial recognition of extraordinary circumstances created enhanced leverage for negotiating comprehensive settlements or pursuing maximum damages through extended litigation. Victoria, Judge Hawkins' orders exceed our most optimistic projections and establish exceptional foundation for comprehensive legal accountability. Derek's systematic abuse has created criminal liability exposure and professional misconduct consequences that extend far beyond family court jurisdiction. We now possess maximum leverage for pursuing complete justice through coordinated legal action, Catherine explained during our post-hearing consultation. The comprehensive nature of judicial intervention represented validation of my strategic decision to pursue systematic legal preparation, rather than accepting Derek's abandonment and financial abuse as inevitable consequences of his superior business position. The woman he had dismissed as a helpless housewife had demonstrated capabilities for sophisticated legal advocacy that fundamentally altered the power dynamics in our relationship while ensuring appropriate accountability for his calculated betrayal. The immediate implementation of Judge Hawkins' orders provided both practical financial security and psychological empowerment that contrasted dramatically with the helplessness I had experienced during Derek's abandonment at the hospital. The comprehensive judicial recognition of his systematic misconduct validated my assessment of his character while establishing legal foundation for pursuing complete justice through expanded proceedings addressing all aspects of his deliberate betrayal. The immediate implementation of Judge Hawkins' comprehensive court orders created financial pressures that forced Derek into desperate negotiation attempts within 72 hours of the emergency hearing conclusion. His assumptions about maintaining control through superior financial resources had been systematically dismantled by judicial intervention that established my immediate financial security, while preserving marital assets from his continued manipulation. The monthly spousal support obligation of $12,000, combined with mandatory insurance coverage and asset preservation requirements, fundamentally altered his financial position in ways he had not anticipated during his systematic betrayal planning. Derek's initial settlement overtures came through Marcus Hartwell's office, presenting proposals that revealed both his growing awareness of legal vulnerability and his continued underestimation of my strategic capabilities and determination to pursue comprehensive accountability for his systematic misconduct. His negotiation approach assumed that financial settlements could eliminate the criminal fraud exposure and professional disciplinary consequences that his behavior had created, demonstrating fundamental misunderstanding of the legal processes that his actions had initiated. The settlement proposals included offers of substantial immediate financial payments in exchange for withdrawal of criminal fraud complaints and agreement to expedited divorce proceedings that would minimize public disclosure of his systematic financial abuse and professional misconduct. Derek's calculations appeared to assume that my primary motivation involved financial recovery rather than comprehensive accountability for his deliberate betrayal during my medical emergency and the systematic deceptions that had preceded his abandonment. However, Derek's negotiation assumptions proved fundamentally incorrect regarding both my motivations and my assessment of the strategic advantages that comprehensive legal proceedings would provide over private settlement arrangements. The evidence we had assembled created opportunities for achieving both substantial financial recovery and appropriate public accountability that private settlements could not accomplish, particularly given the criminal fraud exposure and professional licensing implications that his systematic misconduct had created. Catherine Rodriguez's assessment of Derek's settlement proposals emphasized their inadequacy relative to the comprehensive legal remedies available through continued prosecution of criminal fraud charges, professional disciplinary proceedings, and expanded civil litigation addressing the full scope of his systematic financial abuse. Her strategic analysis indicated that Derek's desperation to avoid public accountability created enhanced leverage for pursuing maximum legal consequences through coordinated proceedings across multiple jurisdictions. Victoria, Derek's settlement offers reflect his growing recognition that criminal prosecution and professional disciplinary action could eliminate his earning capacity while creating permanent damage to his business reputation. His desperation to negotiate private resolution indicates that continued legal pressure will likely produce more favorable outcomes than immediate settlement acceptance, Catherine explained during our strategic consultation about response options. The comprehensive forensic investigation that Judge Hawkins had ordered continued, revealing additional evidence of Derek's professional misconduct that extended far beyond the marital financial abuse we had initially documented. Business records subpoenaed through court authority demonstrated systematic misuse of client funds, fraudulent representations to investors, and violations of real estate licensing requirements that created substantial additional liability exposure while strengthening our position for pursuing maximum legal accountability. Forensic accountant Maria Santos had expanded her investigation to include Derek's professional business practices, revealing patterns of client fund manipulation and investor deception that violated both criminal fraud statutes and professional conduct requirements governing real estate development activities. Her analysis indicated that Derek's systematic deceptions extended across multiple areas of his professional operations, creating vulnerability to prosecution and licensing disciplinary action that could permanently eliminate his primary source of income. Derek's business practices exhibit systematic patterns of client fund manipulation and fraudulent investor representations that constitute clear violations of criminal fraud statutes and professional licensing requirements. These discoveries indicate that his misconduct toward you represents part of a broader pattern of systematic deception that affects multiple parties and creates substantial additional legal liability, Maria reported during her presentation of expanded investigation findings. The evidence of professional misconduct included documentation of Derek's systematic diversion of client escrow funds for personal use, including substantial transfers to support his relationship with Rebecca Walsh, while concealing these transactions from both clients and business partners. His fraudulent representations to investors about project financing and development timelines had created additional victims who possessed grounds for pursuing civil litigation and criminal fraud complaints that would compound his legal difficulties. Most significantly, the forensic investigation revealed that Derek's insurance fraud involving my medical coverage represented part of a systematic pattern of fraudulent insurance claims and policy manipulations that extended across his business operations. His systematic insurance deceptions had affected multiple insurance companies and created substantial additional criminal liability exposure that prosecutors would likely pursue aggressively given the documented pattern of deliberate fraud across extended time periods. The Arizona Department of Real Estate had initiated formal disciplinary proceedings based on the evidence of systematic professional misconduct that our investigation had revealed. Their preliminary assessment indicated that Derek's violations of professional conduct standards warranted license revocation proceedings that would permanently eliminate his ability to practice real estate development within Arizona, while creating substantial barriers to obtaining professional licenses in other jurisdictions. Professional licensing investigator Robert Chen had reviewed the comprehensive evidence of Derek's systematic misconduct and concluded that his behavior violated fundamental ethical standards governing real estate professional practice. His assessment indicated that Derek's systematic client fund manipulation, fraudulent investor representations, and insurance fraud created grounds for immediate license suspension pending formal revocation proceedings that would likely result in permanent elimination of his professional credentials. Mr. Morrison's systematic violations of professional conduct standards represent some of the most egregious misconduct that this department has encountered in recent years. His systematic client fund manipulation and fraudulent business practices indicate fundamental unfitness for professional real estate practice that warrants immediate license revocation to protect public interests. Chen explained during his presentation to the Professional Disciplinary Committee. The criminal fraud investigation had expanded to include multiple law enforcement agencies examining Derek's systematic insurance fraud, client fund manipulation, and investor deception across several years of business operations. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh had coordinated with federal authorities due to the interstate nature of some fraudulent transactions, creating potential for enhanced criminal penalties that could include substantial prison sentences in addition to comprehensive financial restitution requirements. The federal investigation revealed that Derek's systematic fraud activities had affected clients and investors across multiple states, creating jurisdiction for federal prosecution under statutes that carried more severe penalties than state-level charges. His systematic deceptions involving insurance fraud, investment manipulation, and client fund diversion met federal criteria for organized financial crime that prosecutors typically pursued aggressively to establish deterrent effects for similar professional misconduct. Derek's systematic fraud activities meet federal criteria for organized financial crime prosecution due to the interstate nature of his deceptions and the substantial financial harm created for multiple victims across several years. Federal authorities typically pursue such cases aggressively due to their deterrent value for preventing similar professional misconduct, Prosecutor Walsh explained during our consultation about expanded criminal investigation developments. Derek's recognition of expanding criminal liability and professional disciplinary consequences prompted increasingly desperate settlement proposals that revealed his growing awareness that his systematic misconduct had created legal consequences extending far beyond family court divorce proceedings. His latest settlement offers included substantial financial payments exceeding $2 million in exchange for comprehensive releases that would prevent continued criminal prosecution and professional disciplinary action. However, the expanded criminal investigation and professional disciplinary proceedings had progressed beyond points where private settlement agreements could eliminate Derek's legal liability or prevent continued prosecution by authorities who possessed independent jurisdiction over criminal fraud and professional misconduct matters. His systematic deceptions had created public interest concerns that required continued prosecution regardless of private settlement arrangements between parties to the original divorce proceedings. Catherine's strategic assessment emphasized that Derek's desperation to negotiate comprehensive settlements reflected his recognition that continued legal proceedings could result in both criminal conviction and professional license revocation that would permanently eliminate his earning capacity while creating substantial restitution obligations to multiple victims affected by his systematic fraud activities. Derek's latest settlement proposals reflect his growing understanding that criminal prosecution and professional disciplinary action could result in permanent elimination of his earning capacity combined with substantial financial restitution obligations. His desperation indicates that continued legal pressure will likely produce maximum accountability while ensuring appropriate consequences for his systematic misconduct, Catherine advised during our strategic planning consultation. The psychological transformation that I experienced during this phase of legal proceedings reflected both the validation that comprehensive accountability provided and the recognition that my strategic capabilities exceeded anything Derek had anticipated during his systematic betrayal planning. The woman he had dismissed as helpless housewife had demonstrated sophisticated legal strategic thinking that created comprehensive consequences for his deliberate misconduct, while ensuring both financial recovery and appropriate public accountability. The expanding scope of Derek's legal difficulties validated my initial decision to pursue comprehensive legal action, rather than accepting private settlement arrangements that would have concealed his systematic misconduct from other potential victims and regulatory authorities. The criminal prosecution and professional disciplinary proceedings would create permanent public records of his fraudulent behavior while establishing legal precedents that could protect other potential victims from similar systematic abuse. Most importantly, the comprehensive nature of legal accountability that Derek now faced demonstrated that systematic domestic financial abuse combined with professional misconduct created cumulative legal consequences that extended far beyond simple divorce proceedings. His assumptions about superior financial resources providing adequate protection had proven fundamentally incorrect when confronted with comprehensive evidence of deliberate fraud and professional misconduct that affected multiple parties across extended time periods. The investigation also revealed that Rebecca Walsh had participated in some aspects of Derek's systematic fraud activities, creating potential criminal liability for conspiracy and fraud that further complicated his legal position, while eliminating potential sources of personal and financial support during his expanding legal difficulties. Her involvement in insurance fraud and business financial manipulations created additional evidence of systematic criminal activity that prosecutors could use to establish patterns of deliberate misconduct. Derek's business associates and professional partners had begun distancing themselves from his operations, as evidence of systematic fraud and professional misconduct became public through court filings and regulatory investigation disclosures. His reputation within the real estate development community had been severely damaged, creating substantial barriers to securing financing for existing projects while eliminating opportunities for future business development activities. The comprehensive nature of Derek's legal collapse reflected the accumulated consequences of systematic deception and deliberate betrayal that had extended across multiple areas of his personal and professional activities. His confident assumptions about superior business sophistication and financial resources had been systematically dismantled through comprehensive legal action that demonstrated the superiority of thorough preparation and strategic thinking over casual arrogance and financial manipulation. The criminal prosecution proceedings commenced with the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office filing comprehensive fraud charges against Derek Morrison, reflecting the systematic nature of his financial deceptions and the substantial harm created for multiple victims across several years of deliberate misconduct. The charges encompassed insurance fraud, client fund manipulation, fraudulent investor representations, and conspiracy allegations that carried potential sentences exceeding 15 years in federal and state prison facilities. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh had coordinated with federal authorities to ensure that the prosecution's strategy addressed both the interstate nature of Derek's fraudulent activities and the sophisticated methods he employed to conceal his systematic deceptions from victims, regulatory authorities, and law enforcement agencies. The comprehensive nature of the criminal charges reflected prosecutorial recognition that Derek's behavior represented organized financial crime, requiring aggressive prosecution to establish appropriate deterrent effects for similar professional misconduct. The federal criminal investigation had expanded to include charges under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, reflecting the systematic and coordinated nature of Derek's fraudulent activities across multiple business ventures and professional relationships. Federal prosecutors had determined that Derek's systematic deceptions met statutory criteria for organized criminal activity that warranted enhanced penalties designed to address the substantial harm created for numerous victims and the sophisticated methods employed to conceal criminal conduct. The indictment detailed Derek's systematic manipulation of client escrow accounts, fraudulent representations to investors regarding project financing and development timelines, systematic insurance fraud affecting multiple companies and policies, and conspiracy with Rebecca Walsh to implement coordinated deceptions designed to transfer marital assets while concealing these activities from regulatory authorities and affected parties. The comprehensive nature of the charges reflected the scope of criminal activity that forensic investigation had revealed across Derek's professional operations. Derek's arraignment proceedings demonstrated his complete transformation from confident business executive to desperate criminal defendant facing potential imprisonment and comprehensive financial restitution obligations that could exceed $5 million. His appearance reflected the psychological impact of comprehensive legal accountability, with visible signs of stress and deteriorating physical condition that contrasted dramatically with his previous professional demeanor and confident business presentations. The bail hearing revealed additional evidence of Derek's systematic asset concealment and flight risk considerations that prompted Judge Michael Rodriguez to establish substantial bail requirements of $2 million, while implementing comprehensive monitoring and travel restrictions designed to prevent continued asset manipulation or attempts to flee prosecution jurisdiction. The bail conditions included surrender of all passports, weekly reporting requirements, and prohibition of any financial transactions exceeding $10,000 without court approval. Rebecca Walsh's arrest and subsequent cooperation with federal prosecutors provided additional evidence of Derek's systematic criminal activities, while revealing the comprehensive nature of their coordinated deceptions across multiple areas of professional and personal conduct. Her decision to negotiate plea agreements in exchange for testimony against Derek reflected recognition that her peripheral involvement in his criminal activities created substantial liability exposure that required cooperation to minimize potential imprisonment and financial penalties. Rebecca's cooperation revealed previously unknown aspects of Derek's systematic fraud activities, including additional victim investors, concealed business relationships, and sophisticated money laundering techniques designed to transfer criminal proceeds through multiple accounts and jurisdictions. Her testimony provided prosecutors with insider knowledge of Derek's criminal methods and motivations that strengthened the comprehensive case against him, while demonstrating the calculated and deliberate nature of his systematic deceptions. The professional disciplinary proceedings with the Arizona Department of Real Estate had concluded with immediate revocation of Derek's professional license, eliminating his primary source of income while creating permanent barriers to obtaining professional credentials in other jurisdictions. The disciplinary committee had determined that Derek's systematic violations of professional conduct standards warranted the most severe sanctions available, reflecting their assessment that his behavior represented fundamental unfitness for professional real estate practice. The license revocation proceedings had revealed additional evidence of Derek's systematic client fund manipulation and fraudulent business practices that extended beyond the evidence initially available through our divorce investigation. Professional investigators had discovered patterns of misconduct affecting dozens of clients and investors across several years, demonstrating that his betrayal of our marriage represented part of a comprehensive pattern of systematic deception that affected numerous parties and created substantial financial harm. The civil litigation initiated by Derek's defrauded clients and investors had created additional financial liability that compounded his criminal restitution obligations, while ensuring that any remaining assets would be subject to comprehensive recovery proceedings designed to provide compensation for victims of his systematic fraud activities. The coordinated civil litigation represented claims exceeding $8 million, effectively eliminating any possibility that Derek could retain significant assets following resolution of his criminal and civil legal obligations. The bankruptcy proceedings that Derek had initiated in desperate attempts to protect remaining assets from creditor claims had been challenged by prosecutors and civil litigants, who argued that his systematic asset concealment and fraudulent transfers required comprehensive recovery actions that would pierce any bankruptcy protections. Federal bankruptcy courts had demonstrated increasing willingness to deny bankruptcy protection for defendants whose systematic criminal activities created the financial difficulties requiring bankruptcy relief. My participation in the criminal prosecution proceedings provided opportunities to present victim impact testimony that emphasized both the personal harm created by Derek's systematic betrayal during my medical emergency and the broader implications of his criminal conduct for public trust in professional real estate services. The victim impact testimony allowed me to articulate the comprehensive nature of harm that systematic domestic financial abuse creates, while advocating for appropriate criminal penalties that would establish deterrent effects for similar misconduct. The criminal trial proceedings, scheduled for 6 months following Derek's arraignment, would provide comprehensive public examination of his systematic fraud activities, while ensuring that the full scope of his criminal conduct became part of permanent public records available to protect potential future victims. The trial would demonstrate that domestic financial abuse often represents part of broader patterns of criminal conduct that affect multiple parties and require aggressive prosecution to prevent continued victimization. Catherine Rodriguez had coordinated our civil divorce proceedings with the criminal prosecution timeline to ensure that Derek's criminal conviction would strengthen our position for pursuing maximum civil damages, while preventing him from utilizing bankruptcy or asset protection strategies to avoid comprehensive financial accountability for his systematic misconduct. The coordination between criminal and civil proceedings created enhanced leverage for achieving both criminal accountability and civil recovery. The comprehensive nature of Derek's legal collapse had attracted significant media attention from business publications and legal journals, interested in examining how domestic financial abuse cases could reveal broader patterns of professional misconduct requiring coordinated law enforcement response. The publicity surrounding Derek's criminal prosecution and professional license revocation created additional reputational consequences that would affect any future attempts to rebuild his business career or professional relationships. The media coverage emphasized the connection between Derek's abandonment during my cardiac emergency and his systematic professional fraud activities, demonstrating that personal character failures often correlate with professional ethical violations that create risks for clients, investors, and business partners. The comprehensive nature of his misconduct provided valuable case study material for professional education and regulatory policy development, designed to prevent similar systematic abuse. Derek's former business associates and professional partners had initiated their own legal proceedings to recover funds and assets affected by his systematic fraud activities, while distancing themselves from any potential liability related to his criminal conduct. The dissolution of his professional relationships eliminated potential sources of financial or legal support, while creating additional creditor claims that would compete for recovery from any remaining assets. The real estate development projects that Derek had managed were facing comprehensive investigation for evidence of additional fraud or mismanagement that might affect project completion or create additional liability for investors and contractors. Several projects had been placed under receivership management, while regulatory authorities examined financial records and determined appropriate remedial actions to protect investor interests and ensure project completion where feasible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.